Consumers are the core section of any business. In fact, the whole concept of any business is surrounded by the behavior of consumers. And the values of consumer is a crucial factor. Now, we have to understand a consumer as not to be taken lightly. He knows what product he wants. Consumers are extremely smart. They could make decisions about price and value of products in minutes or sometimes in few seconds. So, a business therefore needs to uplift its brand image. Consumers are willing to pay 15 more for quality products. However, the conflict starts when manufacturers failed to meet the expectations. This lies in the basic fundamental of engineering in designing a product. Consumers want products to be softest. But at the same time, they also want product like toilet papers to be light and strong, something which can be easily be torn. The brand Tide is really good example. There was a problem of shaking the washing powder before being put into the machine as it causes the damage of the material of the clothes. Tide had to made up to a lot of expectations for consumers. I suppose it's the truism to point out that citizens need to be well informed. Maybe it's something we take for granted in our liberal Western democracies. But there will be plenty of societies, well, that is run counter to explicit government policy. Many areas of the world still suffer from the reverie of the deliberate missing information. Governments, especially the unelected ones, but also some elected ones, have denied the events that have ever taken place. They pretend that other events did take place. They would help spin what they cannot deny. Ensure they've used every trick of the book, to pull the eyes of the world, and in an attempt to cover up their mistakes. One very important institution in our economy is the bank. Banks manage money for individual people, corporations, and the government. Banks provide a number of important services for you and your family. Most importantly, they're a safe place to store your money. They also provide an easy way for you to transfer money from one place to another. When you write a personal check, the check authorizes the bank to give your money to the person or business whose name is on the check. Of course, banks also lend money. Ordinary people take out bank loans for a number of reasons: to pay for college, to buy or remodel a home, to start or expand a business, and so forth. Banks provide these services to individuals. However, their main function is to lend large sums of money, for example, to corporations. When people or corporations borrow money from a bank, they must, of course, pay interest, a percentage of the money they borrowed. Banks pay interest on the money they hold and charge interest on the money they lend. For a bank to make a profit, it has to collect more interest than it pays out. Sometimes banks invest money as well as lended to invest. Money means to put it into a corporation or some other project, for example, building a housing complex or doing medical research in exchange for a share of the profits. Most businesses need loans and investments at some time, and banks are an important source of both. You might wonder what would happen if all the people with money in a bank wanted to take their money out at the same time. I mean, how would the bank be able to give everyone their money if it had lent out or invested most of it? In fact, this can be a serious problem for banks. They count on the fact that most people won't want their money for a long time. Once it's deposited, that leaves the bank free to lend or invest the money. If every person, or even lots of people, tried to withdraw their money at the same time, the bank might not be able to honor all of its deposits. This causes some banks to fail or go bankrupt. Bank failures used to be common during times of recession or depression. They were especially common during the Great Depression of the 1930s. When Franklin Roosevelt became president in 1933, one of the first things he did was closed all the banks, so depositors wouldn't panic and try to take all their money out. Number. The professor is talking about clinical psychology. In order to know how behavior patterns can be changed, the clinical psychologist has to know what causes the client to behave the way he or she does. Identifying the cause is called diagnosis. In diagnosis, a psychologist uses two basic tools: interviews and psychological tests. Through interviews and tests, the psychologist tries to classify the problem to see if it falls into any non-categories. A psychologist may also attempt to describe the client's personality in terms of how he or she deals with life. For example, some people like to lead, and some prefer to follow the lead of others. Some people are active and outgoing, while others are quiet and reflective. In a diagnostic interview, the psychologist takes the client's case history. This means learning how the client got along with parents, teachers, and friends, as well as how the person handled difficult situations in the past. Psychological testing is the other way that a psychologist tries to diagnose the client's problems. Clinical psychologists have developed tests that can help them learn about a person's intelligence and personality, as well as tests that show whether a person's behavior or perception is influenced by emotions, disabilities, or other factors. Personality testing is useful in discovering how the client tries to adjust to life. Personality tests can reveal unconscious feelings the person is unable to talk about. This information can be important and could help shorten the length of treatment required.
In my opinion, Pocahontas was a spy for the colonists. Yes, she served as a mediator between the British colonists and the Native Americans, but she was more of a spy. As you know, she even provided vital food supplies to the colonists. However, she didn't think of herself as a spy, and the colonists didn't trust her much. Despite her help, in a way, we could say she was a sad spy. Unfortunately, a war broke out between the Pole-Ha-Tuns and the colonists. The colonists captured her and brought her to Jamestown. While she was in Jamestown, as a hostage, she freely converted to Christianity and married John Rolfe. As we all know, this marriage brought the war to its end. What do you think? Was she a mediator or a spy? I believe she was a spy who played a role as a mediator. 1. What role did Pocahontas play between the British colony and the Native Americans?
Now the average adult has about 5 liters of blood flowing inside his body. Blood is the fluid of life, growth and health. It transports oxygen from the lungs to body tissue and carbon dioxide from body tissue to the lungs. It transports nourishment from digestion and hormones from glands throughout the body. It transports disease-finding substances to tissues and waste to the kidneys. Blood is alive because it contains living cells. Red blood cells and white blood cells are responsible for nourishing and cleansing the body. Since the cells are alive, they need nourishment. Vitamins and minerals keep the blood healthy. Blood cells have a definite life cycle, just as all living organisms do. Approximately 55% of blood is plasma. A strong colored clear liquid plasma carries the solid cells and platelets when the human body loses a little bit of blood through a minor wound. The platelets help the blood clot so that the bleeding stops. You would bleed to death without the platelets. Your body is always making new blood inside your bones. When the human body loses a lot of blood through a major wound, that blood has to be replaced through a blood transfusion from other people. But everybody's blood is not the same. There are 4 different blood types plus your body has Rh factors which make it even more unique. Blood received through a transfusion must match your own. Sometimes patients donate their own blood when they are scheduled to have major surgery so that they will have a perfect match. It is called an autologous blood donation.
A hurricane is a massive storm system. In fact, it's the most powerful type of storm on Earth. Hurricanes form over warm tropical waters and frequently move toward land. Before I forget to mention this, hurricanes are also called typhoons or cyclones. It depends on where exactly they form. Not all hurricanes are alike. Some are more powerful than others. Meteorologists have a rating system for them. They use the term category to rank. Every hurricane that forms the scale ranks hurricanes according to their wind speed and ability to cause damage. A Category 1 hurricane is the weakest. A Category 5 hurricane is the most powerful. A hurricane typically begins as a tropical storm. It has wind speeds between 50 to 100 km per hour. When the wind blows faster than 100 km per hour, the tropical storm has become a hurricane. A Category 1 hurricane's winds are between 100 to 130 km per hour. A Category 2 hurricane has winds up to 160 km per hour. Winds between 160 and 185 km per hour indicate a Category 3 hurricane. A Category 4 hurricane has wind speeds up to 220 km per hour. Anything above that is a Class 5 HER. Again, thankfully, those are quite rare. They are simply devastating when they form and make landfall. Oh, by the way, before you ask, typhoons and cyclones use different measuring systems. So what I just described only applies to hurricanes.
This winter has been rather cold. It almost feels like we're entering a new ice age. Now, don't laugh. This statement isn't as crazy as it seems. Yes, global warming is a hot topic these days, but more and more scientists are considering the possibility of global cooling occurring soon. This would result in the average temperatures on Earth dropping. It has happened in the past, and it will happen again in the future. Earth is warm now, but that's not always the case. In the past, large parts of the planet were covered in ice. We call these periods ice ages. Note the plural. There wasn't just one ice age. There have been several. During the recent past, we experienced the Little Ice Age. It lasted almost 500 years from around, say, 1300 to 1800. The ice pack in the Arctic Ocean grew larger and moved south. Glaciers in the European Alps and on Greenland grew bigger and advanced southward. Temperatures dropped all over the northern hemisphere. Winters were longer, summers were shorter, and summer rains were heavier. There were numerous famines, since the cold and rain frequently destroyed crops. Why did this ice age and others like it happen? One theory claims that Earth's orbit caused them. Earth's orbit changes slightly over time, so the northern hemisphere receives less sunlight on those occasions. This reduces temperatures. It's possible that an orbital change caused the major ice ages. In case you're curious, the last such ice age happened around 20,000 years ago.
How often does Earth's orbit change?
No one knows for sure. Scientists estimate it changes between every 20,000 to 50,000 years. There's also a second possible reason for global cooling. This relates to decreased solar activity. The appearance or lack of sunspots can affect temperatures here on Earth. During the Little Ice Age, there were significantly fewer sunspots. For instance, in one 30-year period, astronomers spotted a few dozen sunspots. Normally, they would have seen tens of thousands of them. With less solar activity, some believe temperatures on Earth decreased, thereby resulting in colder weather.
Drums can be divided according to shape. Some of the types are tubular vessel and frame drums. One of the most common tubular drums is the long drum. A lot of long drums are cylindrical. They have the same diameter from top to bottom, like this Polynesian drum. This drum was carved from a length of tree trunks and has a single skinhead for vessel drums. We have the kettle drum. Kettle drums have a single membrane stretched over a pot or vessel body vessel. Drums come in a variety of sizes, from the very large drums of Africa to the very compact and portable drums, like this one from Hawaii. The third type one want you to see is the frame drum. A frame drum consists of one or two membranes stretched over a simple frame, which is usually made of thin,
Early jazz musicians were active in many cities and towns throughout the southern United States. It was New Orleans with its long tradition of African American music that was the home of many fathers of jazz. After World War I, the musicians of New Orleans joined the general northward migration of African Americans. The first great national center of jazz was Chicago. From there, the music entered the mainstream and even gave its name to the decade of the 1920s. Jazz blending African American folk roots with elements of popular music and European classical traditions has been called America.
What is nanotechnology? Well, a report that was put together by a combination of the Royal Society and the Royal Academy of Engineering that came out last summer, identified two topics. Nanoscience is the study of phenomena and the manipulation of materials at atomic, molecular and macromolecular scales, where properties differ significantly from those at a larger scale. Nanotechnologies are the design, characterization, production and application of structures, devices and systems by controlling shape and size at the nanometer scale. So I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about what a nanometer is, but loosely speaking, people think of nanotechnologies as being a sort of 100 nanometers or less. So a virus is something that you can't see by normal light microscopy. You need very advanced techniques for electron microscopy to see it, but that virus is not able to reproduce itself without a host, and us as human beings are made up of lots of different cell types, and we are interested in understanding at the molecular level how that virus infects the liver and why does it infect the liver and it doesn't infect the heart or it doesn't infect other tissues.
Although the original American Indian cultures were highly diverse, they were similar in many of their traditions. Religious beliefs and rituals permeated every aspect of Indian life. Southwest tribes such as the Hopi and the Apaches had a rich and elaborate year-round sequence of ceremonies including songs, dances, and poetry. The Hopi performed dances to bring rain. The Apaches engaged in special dances and ceremonies to gain support of the spirits before undertaking raids or going into war. The Plains tribes often sought contact with the spirits by going on a vision quest. The 1976 Mars Viking landers didn't find any life on the Red Planet. But maybe they weren't looking right. Because at least one researcher thinks that 0.1% of the Martian soil tested by the Vikings could actually have had a biological origin. The Dutch researcher, Joop Houtkoper, presented his ideas on August 24 at the meeting of the European Planetary Science Congress in Potsdam. One Viking test measured unexplained rises in oxygen and carbon dioxide when it was incubating some soil samples. Houtkoper conjectures that the incredibly dry and cold surface of Mars might be home to living cells. Such cells, however, would need to be filled with a mixture of water and hydrogen peroxide, which could stay liquid in the harsh conditions. And if the Viking landers happened to scoop up any of these strange cells, their breakdown products would be in line with the oxygen and carbon dioxide measured. The biomass would then represent 0.1% of the Martian soil by weight, which is, interestingly, comparable to levels found in some Antarctic permafrost.
Radio is a popular form of entertainments throughout the world. The evaluation form will be reviewed by university personnel. The meeting has some struggling overlaps. We study science and appreciate the world around us.